Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am your favorite demon, but not mime, master of minds and of men, the Tona Makai, and welcome back to Makai-World Reviews. I, of course, had some setbacks on getting my stuff out on time. Please forgive me. If you don't, well, I don't really care. We're going to be talking about movies with Mads Mikkelsen. This month, well, at the end of the month, we're going to get them all out at once. And this one is a doozy, as they will be looking at Valhalla Rising. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button and let's go to hell. Movie is Valhalla Rising, directed by Nicolas Winding Refn, a man who I'm a fan of. If you've heard my Bronson review, you'll know that. He has worked with Mads a number of times, and it was difficult to pick a movie that they've done, as I'm kind of trying to limit it to one director per actor per movie, but a talented director that I hope to see more from. He also did the head writing on this film. Starring, of course, Mads Mikkelsen. He's the only actor in this, really, as far as it matters. And what an actor to have, as he certainly knows his trade with movies like the Pusher series, Casino Royale, and lots more, including some huge franchises like Star Wars, Harry Potter, and Indiana Jones. So with that, he won't soon be forgotten. Release date on this is March 31st, 2010. What came out around the same time? How to Train Your Dragon, a really wonderful DreamWorks animated film that I genuinely like, at least the first one. I wasn't particularly a fan of the sequels, but this one was fun and very sweet. Really a movie for anyone. And Hot Tub Time Machine, an incredibly stupid movie that I also enjoyed, with a strangely diverse cast of John Cusack, Crispin Glover, Chevy Chase, and Rob Corddry, among others. It's a fairly simple, fairly dirty comedy, but that's actually pretty funny, despite the weakness of the script. Going over to the plot, we meet One Eye, who has, well, one eye. A slave for a Norwegian tribe, and they are a stoic, cold people. Sans one boy who seems to have taken to One Eye, giving him food, water, and taking care to make sure he is secure in his cage. They form something of a quiet bond. The tribe leader makes their slaves fight for sport, and it seems that One Eye is the top dog, biting throats, splitting skulls, and generally being ruthless. Thus is the routine of his life: sleep, drink, eat, fight, repeat. Often he fights two men while tethered to a pole. I'm sure glad no one gave Dusty that modification for the bull rope match. We learn from the chieftain of the tribe that owns One Eye that the Christians are coming, and as expected, that's not a good thing. One Eye also has visions, the first of which we see are him bathing. This event happens soon after, and he finds an arrowhead in the water while chain bathing. He bides his time, but when it's right, kills the men holding him captive, gets an axe, and then goes and kills the chieftain, placing his head on a pike. Him and the boy begin their travels. One Eye has another vision, and then they meet some Christian missionaries, I guess of sorts, near a group of female thralls and burning bodies. So, spreading the good word they are. Some of them know One Eye's reputation, and after a bite to eat and the boy speaking for One Eye, they decide to head off with the Christians. Where? To Jerusalem, of course, to reconquer the Holy Land. Why not? So they set off on a long boat ride, and I do mean long. No wind, a silent hill-like mist coming through, salt water that is undrinkable. They lose a man on the trip before the men decide all of this was a curse put upon them by the boy. Well, they lose another man trying to kill the boy at the hands of One Eye. Soon after, One Eye finds the water outside is fresh water, and they hit land. A beautiful land, green, lush, rolling hills. But they also have no idea where they are, and they sure as fuck ain't anywhere near Jerusalem. They find some signs of native life, some dead bodies on stilted frames with feathers and the like hanging from them. So, of course, they build a big cross to show that they are now there. And this is the land of the Christians, they say. Soon enough, a man among them goes missing, and a few of the boys assume One Eye killed them. But a lot of them leave on their boat just to explore, see if they can figure out where they are. Well, it's not long until an arrow shot from the tree line kills another one of them. So they get to shore as quickly as possible, but it's pretty paramount at this point what's going to happen. One Eye builds some manner of rock effigy. The man who disappeared before returns covered in mud and clay, claiming he can hear One Eye and that they are in hell. 3 of the Christians attack One Eye, and he kills them. The leader guy is picked off by some natives, and One Eye, the boy, and a few others that are left flee up a hill. Though it ends up just the boy and One Eye, and they arrive at the ocean with natives surrounding them. One Eye holds the boy's arm in comfort before dropping his weapons and stepping between the natives, closing his eyes and imagining himself walking peacefully into the ocean as the natives beat him to death. They then look at the boy, but walk away as we get shots of the green hills and the calm waters. Alright, let's talk about this, starting with directing. This is nothing to take away from Nicolas, but I don't think this is the best example of his directing we can find, as really, besides the action scenes, which all included Mads, it was mostly some walking, lots of sitting in a boat, on a hill, on a log, in a bog. So there couldn't have been too much directorial input in sit there for a bit and look concerned or look off into the distance. Though it was his vision of a movie that really stood out, all of his movies are highly stylized, and this one is no exception. Nicolas is an excellent director for the most part, and everything he did here worked, I think, the way he intended. I am not sure at this point he even needs to direct Mads. They have worked together so often. Though I want to say he did get the best out of a child actor, the boy who played, well, the boy. I think this is a movie fit for Mr. Refn's impressive, if not short, filmography, but also one of my favorites of his, not to bury the lead there. As far as the cine goes, this is where the movie shines. It often looks more like a nature film than an action film, from the deep gray rocks and brown old wood of the Norwegian camps, to the black waters and white mist of the boat, to the beautiful stark greens and blues of the new land. I don't know how much of any of it was shot on set, but I hope it was very little. Locations they had were perfect, every single one of them. I can't gush enough at the look of this movie, the contrast of man imposing himself upon the land, and the dangers that it cost. Where men don't respect the land, it becomes barren and evil. When they do, it flourishes. The lack of lots of dialogue makes this stand out, as if you're not focused on listening, you're looking at the movie, taking all of these colors and lights, or lack thereof. Just good shit. As far as the story, etc., we get a quote at the beginning. In the beginning there was only man and nature. Men came bearing crosses, and drive the heathens to the fringes of the earth. That sort of sums up a good portion of it, but I'd like to say before going forward, I don't think this is an anti-Christian film, necessarily. I do think it has a strong stance against faith that ruins the spirit of man and the spirit of nature, as the Norwegian tribes, the atheists of sorts, and the Christians are all presented as equally kind of shitty. It just so happens that quite often in the westernish world, it's either the Muslims or the Christians that have caused quite a bit of strife about the religion. The Norwegian chieftain did have a great line about the Christians, though. They eat their god, their own god. Drink his blood, eat his flesh. It's abominable. I really chuckled at that. Even though we get a fear of an encroaching religion, it doesn't really go anywhere. We get the head of the Christian ministry people going quite mad, though his acting was so-so. So there is a point when most of his men are dead or abandoned where he just starts passing out titles to anyone near him. You, my head of papal blah blah. It's kind of funny. And we get people trying to take or occupy a land that, well, people already live there, and they are quite fierce. I read that they are in North America at the end, which makes sense considering the type of natives we see, as well as some of their practices and weapons. There's a whole thing about One Eye being from hell, and his second sight where he has visions of the future, but I don't really think they added too much to it. His visions could have easily not been in, and nothing would have changed. In fact, I would think it would make sense for him to be more clever, to have figured these things out himself, instead of seeing some visions telling him. The movie is separated into 5 parts: Wrath, Silent Warrior, Men of God, The Holy Land, and Hell. And while I really liked this, it was also wholly unnecessary. It was just a cool thing. We could have all figured out those sort of themes just watching it. I wonder why One Eye doesn't talk as well. Was his tongue cut out? That's a thing, not that common, but it did happen to slaves or thralls. Either way, the concept is pretty basic, though satisfactory, but really it falls to the wayside when we get into the atmosphere and the action. And let's move to the action and talking about the characters. The action is excellent. The fight scenes, the choreography of them, so well done. We get fighting in the mud, fighting with a bull rope. We get fighting with weapons, arrows, axes, rocks. Mads is splitting skulls and biting throats, as I mentioned earlier. He's the center point of every fight scene, and he makes it goddamn work. He is not the biggest guy, but he has an imposing air about him, and his gruff demeanor works perfectly here. I actually would have liked to see more fights than what we got, but really I like the fact that they didn't overdo it, and he only actively pursued fights in the first part of the movie against people who had enslaved him. The rest of the fighting is reactionary. protecting the boy, being actively attacked, etc. Mads has no lines at all in this movie. He barely utters a sound. So everything is about his body language. It's about his facial expressions. And only having one eye, it's twice the work on that, ironically. The acting besides that is mostly mediocre, save Mads and the boy. I think these two together are wonderful. The boy is kind to him. He's the only one besides One Eye we see go into One Eye's cage to help secure the chains. He feeds One Eye. When One Eye leaves, the boy follows, and One Eye accepts him. He protects him. The boy speaks for him. They even have a comedic moment where he tells people One Eye's name is, well, One Eye, and Mads kind of gives him a quizzical look, and the boy says, well, you have one eye. Later we see One Eye carrying the boy up a hill near the end of the film. This relationship, the lone wolf and pup sort of thing, was ill-defined, but defined enough that it did add to the film for me. Everyone else, they yelled, they delivered their lines with reasonable effectiveness. They sat, they walked. It was what it was. This was Mads' film. As far as the soundtrack, this waxed between just the noise of the world, which created a wonderful sense of tension, and this booming, thundering music that helped with the fight scenes, and some of the moments where you knew something was coming. It isn't much of a soundtrack per se, but it was very effective in its own right, and when the music hit, you knew something was going to go down. Overall, this is a hard movie to recommend. There are some slow moments, especially on the boat, that went a little too long. And the amount and severity of the violence, the lack of dialogue. Mads doesn't speak at all. The dialogue that we do get, at best, is mild exposition. But I really enjoyed the hell out of it. It's brutal, it's different, it's special. If you're inclined to enjoy a kind of paced madness with just enough gore, you get a kick out of this one, and I'd give it a try. I can see a lot of people being put off by the first skull crack, however. Well, that was Valhalla Rising. What would be your preferred weapon on the battlefield? Poleaxe? Warhammer? Let me know down below. And let's not mince words. Let's go ahead and move on to the next movie in our Mads Mad Movie Marathon with The Hunt. This has been the Tony Makai, Master of Minds and of Men, and my only demon that loves you. Thank you, and goodbye.